Welcome, guys, back to our podcast, The Dark and the Strange. If you're joining us for the first time, welcome. If you're rejoining us, you should know my name is Tara, and to my left
is Paul.
Thanks, Paul. Welcome back, guys. So this week, I guess I'm taking the lead in this because I've decided to share some of the stories from my recent trip to Europe, and more specifically today we're going to be talking about Prague, which was probably my favorite country that I visited recently in Europe. So I took about a 6-week trip, basically because my sister ended up getting married in Paris, and near the end of our trip, we ended up going to Prague, and the most incredible, like, gothic fairy tale country. I can't get over how stunning it was. I wish I'd had more time there. But, you know, we decided to take this great tour that was based in Prague. And for anyone that actually goes and travels to Europe or any country for that fact, do yourself a favor and just have a Google if there's any free walking tours in that particular country, because one of the biggest things I noticed with, traveling to new countries is obviously you may not know a lot of history about that particular country, and doing these walking tours is one of the best ways to find out. And, you know, a lot of them were classed as like free walking tours, which, you know, is a concept that I wasn't overly familiar with. Are you familiar with that, Paul?
No, I'm not.
Okay. So with free walking tours, essentially you choose your tip at the end of how much you want to tip your guide based on, you know, their knowledge and their presentation and what you know, how you felt about the walking tour. So, you know, we decided for Prague that we should try something a little bit different than just a standard, you know, history tour. So we decided to do this great tour through Guru Walks called Ghosts, Legends and Mysteries, which was based at night, started at 6:00 at night, and walked through some of the, you know, quiet neighborhoods in Prague. And it was great. And I do definitely want to give a little bit of a shout out to Peter, who was our tour guide. He was fantastic. Really enjoyed conversing with him, and he was just so knowledgeable. And it blows me away, the people that take these tours or the tour guides, because some of them are, you know, scholars, have done, you know, master's degree in history and art history, and yet here they are, you know, sharing their knowledge with you. And so one of the great things that we learnt about on this tour, which I'm going to go into a bit more detail, is called the Codex Gigas, which is also known as the Devil's Bible. So back in the, I'm going to go with 16th century, we heard this story, this legend essentially, about the Devil's Bible. And I wasn't familiar with it, so I'm just going to go over some general basics here. But the legend that is surrounding this particular manuscript, and just to be more specific, this is the last known medieval manuscript in human possession at the moment. It's currently housed in the National Library in Sweden for anyone who's going to be visiting anytime soon. And the codex itself is huge. It's about 75 kilos. It's, you know, about half my height. It's an incredible thing to see. So I'll put up some photos and everything for you so you can have a bit of a look. But the legend surrounding this particular Devil's Bible was how it came into creation. And to this day, scientists can't pinpoint exactly who actually scribed the codex, as well as, you know, the mystery surrounding it. There are a lot of unexplained things, which is probably why I'm deciding to talk about it today. So the Devil's Bible, the legend is that there was this monk and he had broken his vows. And back in those days, obviously, if you broke your vows, you'd be put to death. And one of the forms of, that they would do back then, because for a lot of Christian Romans, they didn't actually bury them inside the they weren't allowed to I have to correct myself on this, but they weren't allowed to be buried within certain areas and whatnot. So then they had these other forms in which came this immurement, which is my new word of the day, immurement. And that is where someone is walled up to death. So they're just placed inside a wall and then bricks surrounding them, and then they go to die, which is really lovely. But while they were creating this brick wall around this monk, he pleaded for his life and said to the the other monks, well, if you let me live, I can create this book of essentially the world's knowledge, and I'll create it by sunrise. And they sort of looked at each other thinking, well, this isn't going to happen. So sure, why not? So they let him out and said, okay, well, you've got until sunrise to create this amazing book. And then what happened was, obviously, the monk sat down and went, well, shit, I can't friggin' write this whole book in a night. So as normal people do, they decide to pray to Satan and say, hey, mate, could you possibly help me out in exchange for my soul so that I can create this book? And, Satan, being such a gentleman, was like, no problem, we'll sort this out for you, and created this manuscript. And also in doing that, the devil also placed a illustration of himself within the actual Bible, which I'll put up for you. And it is quite an interesting depiction of Satan, opposite the depiction of heaven. And then from there, I guess that is where this whole legend came in. And, the monks in the morning were like, wow, okay, you've created this incredible book with all the world's knowledge. And to be more specific, it didn't just alone have the Bible in it. It did have the Bible written in Latin, but it also had other several works in there, like the Antiquities of the Jews, the War of the Jews. It also had, certain knowledge about medical stuff at the time as well. So it had all of those things. And it was Old and New Testament of the Bible. So to put it in perspective for you, writing these specific things out would take someone 5 years straight if they were to continue writing. That's how much was written in this book, that apparently was written overnight. So obviously he then got to live and they let him go. And then henceforth this beautiful legend was born. From all the historians as well as scientists who have looked over the codex, what they can tell is that the book itself is written all by one scribe. And what it also shows is that it appears to be in somewhat of a short period. Obviously, when we think about, your own handwriting over time, like my handwriting changes probably dependent on my mood, to be honest. But to actually keep that consistency for such a period of time is significantly hard. But this particular book indicated that it was written in a short amount of time, all by one particular scribe. They've estimated that, generally if someone was to write that to this day, it would take probably closer to 25 years.
Wow. It's a long time.
Yeah. And it was obviously quite a special book. And then come into the, the 1600s is when Sweden ended up their 30-year war with Czech Republic and took all of these particular things out of the country. So that's why now it is located in Sweden. So yeah, that's essentially the story of the Devil's Bible.
Sounds certainly interesting, to say the least. So in regards to the Devil's Bible, is it a good thing or a bad thing, or how is it depicted nowadays? Where is it looked upon as evil or good, or what's the general consensus?
I don't think it's so much, looked upon as necessarily good or evil. I think obviously for superstitious people, if they do believe that the legend is true and it was written by the devil, then they believe it's, as they've called it, the devil's Bible. But, for most sake, there isn't really anything that's happened around the Bible. Like nothing evil has necessarily come from the Bible. However, obviously that depiction of Satan is now quite famous. It kind of reminds me a little bit of like Tenacious D. I feel like if they were like, hey, can we get Jack Black to do a depiction of Satan, he'd be like, this is it. This is the one.
Okay.
Which is kind of weird because he looks like he's wearing this like diaper at the bottom of it. That didn't really make sense to me. But, for all intents and purposes, I thought it was a pretty cool like drawing, I suppose. But I think it's just, in general, like to me, it does bottle my mind that this particular manuscript was even, written out by someone all that time ago to actually be a scribe as a job back then. And then, to maintain such a perfect scripture, like just the whole way through. And that's why it is so, mystifying to, scientists who look over this manuscript, because it seems physically impossible that this was created.
You mean in one night or over a period of time, or what
Well,
exactly
I
do you
suppose
mean by
in
that?
general, because really, let's put aside the whole one night thing. Even if that's just, legend. If someone did actually create this manuscript and even if it did take them 5 or 25 years, surely you would think that there would be some sort of information as to who that particular scribe was and who, there would be some more, than just this one night. You know what I mean? Like there would be,
Yeah, sure. I
yeah,
get
there
you.
would be, some sort of information. There would be, history on it, but there's nothing. It is just all gone. So that's, I guess, it does add to it. But yeah, and as I said, the scientists have come and tried to obviously figure out, how this is in existence, and to this day, it just still remains a mystery.
Yeah, I guess probably one of the reasons why it is a mystery would essentially be down to the fact that the Czechs, they lost the war against Sweden. Is that correct?
Yeah, they lost the war against Sweden.
Well, is it correct? Yes or no?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So when a country loses a war, then potentially what happens is that the other country takes their possessions and stuff that's relevant to that country, and a lot of history is lost because mostly countries that conquer another country make the history then for the country that they've been conquered. So that's something that's quite evident throughout history. So that's the reason why I asked that they lose the war.
Well, there was a little bit more mystery involved with the particular codex as well, because there was some instance where the guy who had the book at the time, in Sweden, there was a fire in that particular, I think it was a royal palace, and to save the book, they threw it out the window. And then they're saying that apparently when that happened, that these 10 pages of the codex also came out of the book, and now we don't know what was on those pages or where they are. They're just gone.
So is there any like significance within the book itself that, tells us something different or gives us a different perception maybe on the Old and New Testament? Or is there anything in it really that people kind of disagree with or agree with, or is it kind of lost information?
Well, it is essentially, because it's meant to be the book of world knowledge, it's written in an unbiased perspective, but it's just and I do believe there's like some satanic practices and stuff in it as well. So I'm not entirely sure.
So if one was to view this book now, whereabouts in Sweden would you find it?
The National Library in Sweden.
Okay, and basically anyone can go in and look at this book, is it?
Yes.
Ah, okay. Probably we'll get some photos and put it up on the podcast so that people can see it. And if you're ever in Sweden, whereabouts?
Stockholm, like.
Okay. I seriously think we need to get Google for this podcast. Because in terms of information, we're not.
I haven't been to Sweden. I only got to Prague.
That's okay. All right. But if one wanted to go and see the book,
Yeah, I believe it's Stockholm, so which is where the National Library of Sweden is. So if you are wanting to go and see it, I can't read Latin, so good luck to you if you can. But
my phone can translate if I take a photo of it, and can translate the language on Google. So that's really handy.
Isn't that beautiful that we just live in this, because that's exactly what I want to do, especially with the Bible. I think, I need to read it in Latin. Let me just translate it.
Yeah, well, whatever you're into. But I mean, all in all, sounds really interesting. I would certainly like to see this in my lifetime. Whether I get to Sweden or not, who knows? But it certainly sounds interesting for sure. And I'm always interested in, books of old that have a certain mysteria about them. And this one certainly does for sure. Absolutely. And anything related to the Bible, obviously, is something that's a very deep interest to me, because I think it's important, I guess, from a religious perspective, but also from a human perspective as well, just to get your own insight into this religious text and an understanding. And obviously, me being from a Catholic country, it's very relevant to myself.
Yeah, well, I just find the whole legend fascinating. I suppose people will think of anything when they don't want to die. I mean, I feel like there could have been so many more different things that were offered up as like a thing, but
So just to go back to that word that you came up with earlier on, what was it called again for encasing someone?
Immurement.
Immurement. All right. So that was a thing back then?
Yeah, it was a huge thing back then. Particularly with churches, nuns, any nuns that broke their vow. They all just got walled up.
Right. Okay. And that was it, just walled up and left to die.
Yep.
Oh, it's amazing. Hey, that's something that I didn't really know about until you brought it up today. It sounded quite interesting. I'll have to do a deep dive on Google.
I'll put up a picture. I found a really good photo of someone being walled up. It's just a drawing. Calm down.
Oh, okay. Well, they hardly would have had the iPhone back then.
Yeah, I know, right?
Yeah.
Selfie.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, yeah. Just before I get walled up here, I'm going to take a selfie.
Yeah.
Yeah, as you would nowadays, obviously, if that thing was still around. But yeah, that's really, really interesting. So anything else to discuss?
Yeah, I mean, look, the tour itself went for like a solid two. I think it was only meant to be like 2.5 hours, but we ended up staying a little bit longer and having a good conversation with him. But while we were sort of walking through these sort of like back neighborhoods in Prague, it was so quiet and so eerie. And one of the things I really notice about, and maybe that's just a difference about living in Australia, like all our streetlights are really kind of that white or cool white. But over there it's like this warm lighting. So it almost feels like there's these lanterns kind of floating, in the streets, because it's just this warm light that bathes everything. And, you got to think about like the cobblestones everywhere, like everything is just so beautifully gothic fairy tale styled. And we're walking through this little neighborhood, and we come down this like really narrow sort of alley, and it would only fit like one car. And I think I took a photo of it, so I'll put that up so you can see what I'm talking about. And you can see there were these windows, and they've kind of got like the iron like fencing around the window. So and that was actually where women used to work back in the early 1900s. For a lot of women, if you didn't have much money and you came from a poor family, generally one of the only things you you would be able to do for money is go into prostitution.
So like a red light district
Yeah, kind of like a red light district
without the red light.
without the red light.
Okay.
Without the fun jokes. But yeah, so essentially there was this woman who worked there in this particular prostitution district. We'll just call it that for now. And her name was, and I apologize because out of all of the different languages I had to try and sort of learn and pronounce, Czech is really up there with difficulty level. But her name was Atilia Vranska, and I'm sorry if I butchered that. But she was 22 years old when she came to Prague and started working as a prostitute. And for a lot of them, what they did, instead of actually taking, money as payment, they would accept more things like food or shelter. And for a lot of them, it was also their way of trying to find a husband. Isn't that nice? Like, oh, we don't have online dating, so let's just prostitute ourselves out and hopefully I'll find a husband.
Well, I think you have to look at it from the perspective that it was a different era, a different time, and we really can't relate to that.
No.
We have no idea.
No,
I mean,
absolutely none.
Here we are in 2025. For most people, life is good. You've got food, you've got shelter, you got an income. You don't really, not everyone, and I'm not going to start ranting, but because nobody wants to listen to me ranting, I go on and on and on. But the majority of people, especially in Australia, they have a good lifestyle, or at least they're not starving or on the streets. Most people. Back then, society was very, very different. You didn't have social welfare set up. You basically had to fend for yourself if you had no money, and you had to do what you had to do to survive. So very, very different times.
Yeah. Couldn't just ghost people back then either,
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think social media was around back then either, Tara.
Anyway, so essentially, she was working in this district and she started regularly seeing a customer, and he was a sergeant general in the army. Okay, so I'm just dropping that in there so you've got reference to that. Anyway, so I'm going to probably butcher this story a little bit too, but as the story goes, she was seeing this regular client and he basically promised that he would marry her. And, she would move in with him, all these things. So this went on for several months. She kept pushing him, when are we getting married? When are we getting married? And he just sort of kept saying soon, and kept, delaying it. And, of course, back then the thing was as well is it was, it wasn't as popular a family choice to marry a prostitute. So at this stage, he got to the point where he couldn't put off, this forced engagement any longer, and decided to end things with her and turned up with a different woman to say, I'm no longer with you. I'm with this chick now. So sorry about that. So she got, very upset and, basically, went and saw him late one night, had a huge argument with him, him and his current girlfriend, pushed her out. And then she was never to be seen from again after that night. Well, when I say seen, I mean alive, I should say. After that, the next day, there was a train coming in from Bratislava and it had a suitcase. And located within that suitcase was her head and limbs. And that was just in the one suitcase. No one knew where it obviously came from. They didn't have cameras back then. And then shortly after, on the same day, there was a train that came in from, going to Slovakia, and that had her torso in it. So they were both the suitcases were brought back to Prague, and then she was formally identified, and it was Atilia, who'd been cut up and put in these two suitcases and left. And if you do a little bit of a Google search, there are some quite graphic photos of that, which I won't put up for here. If you need any assistance with that, let me know and I'll send you a link. But they're essentially from there. They did an autopsy and they were sort of, looking at these cut marks and everything. I thought, oh, well, it must have been, a surgeon or a butcher that's done something like this. And they deemed that her death had been due to, it looked like a meat cleaver had hit her in the back of the head. It wasn't until semi-recently when the case got reopened, because it was a cold case that hadn't been solved for such a long time. And because they kind of went off the fact that they thought that the murderer was, a butcher or someone in a medical profession, they never found this person. When they redid the autopsy and they actually, for some reason, they hid this information that her actual cause of death was a knife, like a slit mark that went from essentially ear to ear. And when they kind of obviously sat down and re-examined all the evidence on that, one of the things they said was that, to successfully kill someone in that manner, you'd have to be quite proficient in killing people or, those particular methods, which is why they kind of then more lent towards her ex-boyfriend at the time, who, as I said before, is a sergeant general in the army.
Sounds interesting.
So yeah, they haven't officially solved her murder. However, there's an 80% certainty that it was the ex-partner that ended up killing her, and his mistress at the time was also assisting in that as well. So,
well, thanks for getting to the bottom of that, Tara.
You're welcome.
Your detective work rivals that of Sherlock Holmes, so I'm pretty impressed.
I thought it is extremely unfortunate that was her demise. Looking back and looking at when you're standing in that alleyway and you're looking at all these windows, it does kind of, sit heavy on you that what these women had to go through, just to be able to have, safety and shelter and to feel love, I guess.
Well, I'm pretty depressed after listening to that. I don't know what the viewers are going to be like. I need some alcohol.
Well, look, there were so many other bits and pieces to Prague, and so there's so much history when it comes to European countries, particularly ghost and folklore stories. You could just sit here all day and talk about the different things that you learn over there, but obviously, for me, Prague is definitely special to my heart, and those were the two particular stories that stuck out to me the most. If there's anything anyone themselves would like to know more so about Prague, or if you have a story that you're familiar with from Prague, I do definitely encourage you to comment in our section so that I can have a look into it as well. There was a lovely story about a countess with bread shoes. So, if you ever do want to hear that story, let me know. It's a little bit gruesome, like most interesting folk stories. But essentially that is kind of it from me today, and the specialties of Prague, I guess.
Well, thanks for sharing that, Tara.
You're welcome.
Certainly was intriguing.
You've been very quiet, Paul. Is there anything you want to ask?
No, I'm presently really depressed after listening to that.
Wow.
But not really, no. I found it most interesting, as I said earlier, about the Devil's Bible. That certainly is something that I'll have a look at more. And I'm sure there'll be viewers out there that'll certainly do a deeper dive on Google and so forth and so on. Sorry for mentioning Google, by the way. We're not paid by Google or anything like that. It's just that Google is my go-to for everything.
Well, I think, particularly when people think about some of the most famous books, in the world, people don't even know about the Codex. They don't know about that one. They think about, a lot of ancient Egyptian books.
Sure, yeah.
That's probably the ones I would go to if someone said, famous books. But
well, I had no idea what it was until you brought it up on the podcast today. So I thank you for doing that.
Sorry, I'm also aware that you don't know what a thesaurus is. So
yeah, Well, here I am being nice and kind and generally supportive, and yet you make these crude jokes.
It's very interesting, you know?
Yeah, not really, actually, at all. But anyway, we'll move on.
But yeah, thanks guys, because that was my extremely non-rehearsed, non-teleprompted subject for the day, and I hope you do enjoy it. I hope that, if you haven't gone to Prague, definitely put that on your list for Europe. I know a lot of people hear good things about Prague, and I honestly can't speak highly enough of the experience itself. It is such a beautiful country. I wish I'd spent at least a week there, because just roaming around the streets, the whole feel of it is just incredible. There is just such a vibe. It's so lively and just full of rich history. So just please put that on your list. Skip the well-known stuff and go to the off the beaten track things.
Well, thanks for that, Tara. And thanks for plugging Prague today. I'm certainly sold. So after this podcast, I'll be jumping on Google again and checking out flights to Prague, because you did a really good job in selling it to me today. By the way, we're not being paid for this podcast either by anyone. We don't promote anything, but Tara's just been promoting Prague for the last 25 minutes. But that's good.
Well, I don't know. I mean, see, before I got into my current job, I was a travel agent. So
No way, really?
Shut up.
Okay.
But this was my first time in Europe, actually. It took me 35 years to finally get to Europe. Thanks, Tess. That was a forced Europe holiday that was amazing. But yeah, absolutely loved it. So thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you to the viewers for listening today. I'm sure you learned a lot. I certainly did. And I appreciate the fact that you listened through the whole podcast, which is amazing. Other than that, I have no more for today. Tara, you're all good?
Yeah, I'm relatively talked out, I think.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And guys, keep listening and have a great day. From me, Paul.
I'm Tara. I'll see you next time.
See you guys. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.